Thank you for being here. It is our pleasure at Region 12 to host this event for you today. It is indeed our pleasure every day to serve the 77 school districts and 13 charter schools in Region 12 and to bring you information on topics relevant to our profession and what we do every day, what you do every day. Thank you so much for that work. Welcome to Region 12. We hope that you enjoy today's program, and again, it is indeed our pleasure to work with the Association of Texas Professional Educators by sponsoring this or hosting this event. So thank you all so much. We're glad you're here, and we look forward to getting started.
Thank you. Well, we are very honored this morning to have a gentleman here with us. Mr. Tim Lee is the Executive Director of the Texas Retired Teachers Association. He began his career as an advocate for public education retirees in 1996 when he was hired as a legislative intern for the Illinois Retired Teachers Association. And just a very short year later, in 1997, he was picked to lead IRTA as the newly elected executive director of that organization, and he held that position for 8 years. He's worked on public committees, on public pension policy, and he has served on gubernatorial commissions. He's participated in forums with legislative leaders, and he's attended numerous conferences about managing our retirement. We were very fortunate to have him come to Texas Retired Teachers Association in 2004. It was a wonderful, wonderful thing for us to have him come and be our executive director. He attended public schools in Springfield, Illinois, and he's a graduate of Illinois State University with postgraduate credit at the University of Illinois. One of the things, though, he's most proud of is his family, his wife, Nicole, and they have 4 children, Carter, Grace, Ethan, and Ryan, and I imagine he'll tell us something about them when he gets up here. He's a very passionate speaker and a very energetic leader, and I know you're going to get some valuable information this morning that you can take back. Would you join me in giving a warm Waco welcome to Tim Lee?
Thanks, Sue. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Well, that introduction is entirely too long, but it was certainly nice of Sue to read that. And I'm glad to be back here in Region 12. This is almost beginning to be a second home for me here, and I cannot stand up here and not say how much we appreciate the work done by the Regional Service Center to help our Retired Teachers Association. They generally have their meetings here, and we are very glad to work with them. Certainly glad to work with ATPE and all of the organizations representing the professional educators around the state of Texas in these difficult and trying times. And unfortunately, they're difficult and trying because people are doing things to make them more difficult and more trying. When Sue asked the question, how many of you are nearing retirement, everybody should have raised their hand. Because every day that you finish is one day closer to retirement. And, you know, my kiddos go to public schools. I have 4 of them, as Sue said. 3 of them go to Kiker Elementary School, and all 3 of them are dealing with some situations that are harder on mom and dad maybe than on them, and that's dyslexia. One of my sons has double deficit dyslexia, which I did not even know what that was until we had people explain it to us. And being a student that things sort of came easy to me, I didn't understand it, and I didn't know how to deal with it. And so my public schools and Kiker Elementary is just a great system, and I think that we have to do everything that we can to provide not only an enriching job environment for our public school workers, but also take care of them after their public service. And there is something that is getting lost in the message against educators in general, and that is that you all are performing a public service. Just like our judges, just like our legislators, just like our police and our firefighters, you are performing a public service. And if you ask the general populace, if you think a lawyer in the private sector gets paid more than a lawyer in the public sector, most people are going to agree that a person in the private sector is generally getting paid more than a person in the public sector. An accountant in the private sector is generally thought of as getting paid more than an accountant in the public sector. People understand that you are giving up a little bit to not only serve the public, but then to have something on the backside of your service. And a lot of times we talk about the retirement benefit as sort of that back-end reward for 30 years of performing a public service. We are, though, in a war against those individuals and interest groups that want to fundamentally change your retirement benefit plan. And part of that is because there were a lot of bad decisions made in other states, mostly by elected officials, to create the circumstances that many people believe we have to do something about this retirement crisis. Well, let me make a few things clear. Number one, there is a retirement crisis in this country. Unfortunately, it is based on the fact that the private sector has sold out retirement benefits for their employees in the large part over the last 15 years. If you think about how secure retirement is for the baby boomer generation, you will begin to hear people say, my feeling is I don't have enough time to prepare for retirement. I have some slides, we're going to get to the slides in a second. But one of those slides talks about how the baby boomer generation is so ill-prepared for retirement. And instead of trying to solve the problems that we know are coming with retirement security in the country, there seems to be a growing sentiment that those who do have some retirement security, we just need to get rid of it for them as well. And that way, at least we're all in the same boat. And that is troubled and unable to pay for anything when we get older. But here in Texas, we have done things a different way, and it has largely paid off into a retirement system that is a lot better than many other public funds out there in the country. And we're going to get into some of that. So let's first start with what the retirement system is providing. First slide, please. All right, skip past this one. I'll tell you about who TRTA is at the end. All right, a major type of plan in which an employer promises a specified monthly benefit on retirement that is predetermined by a formula based on employees' earnings history, blah, blah, blah. You get the idea. What we're talking about here is a defined benefit traditional retirement plan. This is the basis of the attack, to rid our public sector of what we call defined benefit retirement plans. A defined benefit retirement plan uses a formula based on the years that you put into the system, your age at retirement, a multiplier determining your final average salary calculation, and then comes up with a number. And that number, that annual amount broken out into 12 payments every year, is your monthly take-home pay in retirement. And it can never be taken away. It can never be lowered. It is a defined benefit for the rest of your life. And many people are not in the circumstance today of having a defined annuitized benefit for the rest of their life. Maybe they have $150,000 in savings. I could ask, what do you think the average amount is that people have in a savings plan or a 401k at age 55? And some people may speculate it's $250,000, you know, maybe more, maybe less. We're going to find out, though, it's a lot less than that. And that is the nest egg that they have to survive on for the rest of their life, besides something like Social Security. And we're going to get into Social Security in just a few minutes as well. But it's not a lot of money. And one study recently said that a person at age 65 when they retire should have about $2 million saved for their cost of living simply for their health care. That does not include the cost of living in a house or paying for activities or whatever. And so it is expensive to live in retirement, especially when we're looking at the cost of goods and services. Most of the cost of goods and services are based on items like going out and buying a new television or something. But there are several other major layers of cost of living that are generally not applied into that inflationary figure that we hear about. The best linkage I have is if you were driving in like me this morning and you heard the news that Social Security recipients are going to get a 1.7% cost of living raise on their Social Security benefits next year. Well, that 1.7% is supposed to make up for inflation. And if you go to your local big box store and decide to buy a TV, well, TVs are going to cost about the same. You may get a few more bells or whistles now. You may get a slightly different size of television for that same price point, but by and large, you're going to expend, X amount of dollars. And that inflationary rise in the cost of living, that's sort of what's applied in that number. Things that are not implied in that number, gasoline. All right, so the cost of gasoline for retirees has gone up over 200% since the last time they saw a real cost of living. I'm not doing so well. I'm only on slide 1. All right, so I'm going to have to digress. Let's go to slide 2. All right, the Teacher Retirement System Defined Benefit Plan. Talked about some of these benefits already. You cannot outlive your benefit. Funds are managed by a TRS investment professional. That is a major, major point, which I want to get into more in depth here in just a few minutes. You're guaranteed only the amount of your annuity at retirement. And this is a sticky point for our current retirees. I saw several of those hands go up. Our retirees have not received a cost of living increase in their retirement benefits for 12 years. And so what you have at retirement is guaranteed, but it is not guaranteed to go up. And that's another section of our organization, is to promote cost of living increases for retirees when they're able to be paid. There is no cost of living. Okay, we've already talked about that. Next slide, please. TRS was created in 1937. Anybody remember what year Social Security was created? 35, kind of enabling time frame. 36, 37 is when benefits started getting paid in. Anybody know how much the first Social Security amount ever paid out? Anybody know? It was like 16 cents. So it started out small. But as you can see, the history of retirement security kind of were happening at the same time statewide with the creation of these retirement plans and Social Security. Today there are over 1 million people in teacher retirement system. 1 out of every 21 Texans either pays into TRS or is receiving a benefit from TRS. Average years of service, you can take a look and you'll see, one I'll kind of focus in on is the average monthly life annuity, $1,897. That is not a lot of money to live on. This is not a rich benefit plan. Our retirement benefits in the state of Texas started at about 36% less than other state retirement plans. So if you think about your friends who may retire in Illinois or Ohio or California, there are many states that you can compare ours to, and our retirement benefits are less at the beginning, and because we do not have a cost of living adjustment, they tend to be less over the course of somebody's remainder of their life. Now, we don't have the same problems that those other states have, and we'll talk about that again here in just a couple of slides. Next slide, please. All right, why is the issue of defined benefits prevalent now? And we started this in kind of the intro. You cannot pick up a newspaper today without hearing about the financial crisis in some way or other. And the financial sector is so heavily involved in planning for people's retirement, whether it's in the private sector or in the public sector. And in the public sector, our public pension plans are what we call institutional investors. They have lots of money. It's a pooled asset structure. So whether you're an administrator, a classroom educator, you perform some of the duty in the school, your money is pooled into this massive retirement system. And the investment professionals over at TRS invest those dollars for you. It costs about $75 a year for the management of your retirement system for the investment structure. And that goes up and down a little bit depending on how well the system is doing. I've got some updated numbers on that we'll talk about. But by and large, it costs less than $100 for your retirement system to manage those investments. Find a 401k manager out in the private sector today who's saying, I'm willing to take a flat rate of about $100 to invest your money for you. You probably couldn't even manage your own investments on E-Trade or Ameritrade or pick your day trader webpage, and every time you click trade, it costs between $5 and $7 more or less, depending on how much of a service you're buying. And so it's a really low management fee that the retirement system is charging back to the people in the fund. All right, so most people today, as we said, have very little retirement security, and people are trying to launch off into multiple attacks on public pension plans to get rid of them. And one of them has to do with privatization. That's a fun word that we deal with a lot of times. And go to the next slide, but also in the next legislative session, you're probably going to hear about things like privatization. May not necessarily be on pension funds, but it may be on other forms of public education that people want to talk about. So in Texas, and I'm trying to think of the best word to use for describing the opposition to our defined benefit plan. I have started using the word agitators. I don't know if it fits or not, but it's a word that I'm going to use. Who are the agitators out there arguing against their teacher retirement system here in Texas? Well, one of them is a guy named Bill King. And Bill King is a lawyer. He is a former public servant himself, as the former mayor of a town near Houston called Kemah. As I understand it, Kemah is kind of a fun town to hang out. It's got all kinds of attractions and things to go to. But Mr. King's story was that he wanted to run for the mayor to be the mayor of Houston, and he really became intrigued with the financials for the city of Houston. And one of the areas that he thought needed some real attention were the benefits that were being promised to municipal workers in the city of Houston. I make no comment on what is going on with the city of Houston and their retirement plans. But Mr. King wants to take what he thinks needs to be done in Houston, and he wants to now apply those same lessons to your retirement system. And many times he will be quoted in columns. He is a syndicated columnist for the Houston Chronicle. So not only does he have a voice as being a former mayor, but he also has the power of the pen. The Houston Chronicle has sort of a wide distribution, and he is oftentimes providing articles on why we need to change retirement plans for all public workers. And he focuses more and more in his articles on TRS and this other statewide retirement plan called the State Employees Retirement System. All right, so we have the Texans for Public Pension Reform, lumped Texas TRS in the same category, although Texas TRS is 83% funded. I'll get into funded ratios and why that matters in just a minute. There's another group called the Laura and John Arnold Foundation. This is a very interesting group. They have a lot of causes that they're trying to persuade public policy makers to take up. One of them happens to be the elimination or transition, is what they may say, of your retirement plan from a defined benefit plan to some other form. We presume that it means a defined contribution plan. As we understand it, about a year ago this month, there was a public policy conference being hosted by this foundation at the SMU school, the George Bush Institute at Texas, somewhere up in Dallas. And so they hosted a conference, and they titled the conference, Getting From Here to There, changing TRS Texas into some other kind of retirement plan. The interesting part about that conference was that it was sort of a closed door, you had to be invited to go to it sort of event. But nobody that I know was actually invited to go to the event. And, you know, I know people like the director of the teacher retirement system, and, you know, certain legislators have been involved in this, and groups that are, or organizations that are working on trying to make the retirement system better and stronger. I don't know anybody who attended the conference. What I know is that people from around the country, though, received invitations and were brought here to Texas to talk about your teacher retirement system. I don't know what out-of-state folks have to do with changing your teacher retirement system unless there was some common thread of discussion that was occurring about changing all teacher retirement systems from a defined benefit plan to some other form of defined contribution or 401k or hybrid or whatever. We talked about the conference. Go on to the next slide, please. Thank you so much. One of the quotes that we've heard recently is, without significant changes to current systems, public pension payments will quickly crowd out other discretionary spending like education and public safety, says Dr. Josh McGee from the Laura and John Arnold Foundation. Mr. McGee would be, I think, smart to look up how much is actually being paid out of the Texas budget for all TRS programs, including our defined benefit plan payments, our health insurance program that we support for retirees, to administer the plan, and I really want to hit on this point in just a second. About 2%, 2% of the state's budget is paid into this teacher retirement system. That is a significant investment, but the teacher retirement system earns, on average, about 8% on the investment structure. On that 8%, they pay out annually about $7 billion in pension payments. In that $7 billion in pension payments, it creates a tremendous economic engine for the state in what our retirees are paying for in goods and services, what we are earning on the investments, how TRS is invested in most of the Fortune 500 companies that are based in the state, and we're providing investment capital for those organizations and getting a return on that investment. This entire program is an economic engine that is driving the state for that 2% of budget allocation. Just talking about Social Security costs, as you probably well know, Texas TRS is not coordinated with Social Security. Well, what does that mean? It means that most of our employees working in the public school system today do not have Social Security. And that cost savings alone for the taxpayer is estimated to be about $100 million a year. So the fact that we're not sending our money off to Washington, D.C. To let them manage it through the Social Security Trust Fund and wondering whether or not it's ever going to get there to begin with, we know where our money is. We know it's invested in our Texas teacher retirement system and that it is a part of our state because it invests in things in our state. All right, so next slide, please. Mr. King, again, another quote from Bill King from one of the articles that he wrote. The truth is that we have significant problems and a looming crisis with most of our Texas public pension plans. There are many ways to address this problem. Private industry did so 20 to 30 years ago, mostly by freezing their existing defined benefit plans and converting future pension benefits to defined contribution plans. This is not true. It was in the late 1990s that many private sector groups, private sector companies went to Congress to argue that the laws governing private pension plans were too onerous and that they were preventing private sector growth. Why? Because private sector retirement plans were mandated to pay for those benefit payments up front. And the private sector basically said, we want to find a better way to increase the bottom dollar for our investors and get rid of these long-term liabilities. I'm not going to belabor this point a whole lot, but let me just say there was a book written by a person who worked for the Wall Street Journal So, not some, if somebody's going to criticize me, well, he's going to argue the liberal side of this. The last time I checked, the Wall Street Journal was not being criticized for being overly liberal in the media. This is a reporter who was really digging into it, and she wrote an entire book about the private sector's transition away from defined benefit plans and into the 401k plan system. It did not happen 20 or 30 years ago. It happened about 15 years ago or less, and we'll be paying for that in the future. That bill has not hit us yet. Most people retired today, people like maybe your parents or my parents, many of them have a private sector retirement plan. It won't be for another 10 or 15 years that we realize the baby boomer generation that their retirement benefits were sold out really starts to hit our public service and our public budgets. So we're going to see more of that in the future. All right, next slide, please. What do they want to change? Well, talking basically about it, I already addressed this. They want to change it from a traditional retirement plan to a defined contribution plan. What does this mean? The basis of this is they want to transfer the full liability of the cost of your retirement away from the state and onto you, and saying that you're on your own. Their model seems to be hold up the private sector as our model, as the best way to do this, and that is to throw everybody out there as individuals to find an investment manager to help them plan for their future. I feel like I need to hit the fast forward button and say, how's that working out for us? Come back in 15 years when we're talking about the explosion costs of either Medicaid at the state level or people demanding higher payments in Social Security because they don't have enough money saved to survive, and all of a sudden we're going to realize when all those 401k dollars are gone and spent, where are we as a country? Because we don't have additional backstop of annuitized savings accounts for individuals because the money is simply gone. But the model they want to lift up is the one of the 401k. You only have to look to the state of Louisiana to see their dream come to reality, and that is the public sector relinquishing all retirement security responsibility in a move made this last year, the spring into summer. The Louisiana legislature eliminated the annuitized or defined benefit plan for state employees. New state employees in Louisiana no longer have a defined benefit plan, and they are not participants in the Social Security program. So if you think that these things are far off and distant lands and cannot happen for years to come, Louisiana is just one state over, and it just happened. So, last time I checked, certain political officials here in Texas and certain political officials in Louisiana seem to be friendly. And I have every assurance in my mind to think they're probably talking about this. As a matter of fact, at least the GOP Governor's Conference, my understanding, has made pension reform in states their #1 issue. With all of the issues facing states, their #1 issue is pension reform. And so that gives you some idea of how serious this situation is. All right, next slide, please. Why are they promoting DC plans? Well, you can read the slide for yourself, but basically it's about privatization, and as I said, shaking off that responsibility of having the state having any participation in your retirement future. They believe it's too much of a liability. The people who are advocating for change really believe that the explosion cost of retirement security in the future is not being paid for sufficiently, and they want to be rid of it, and they're trying to convince policymakers that now is the time to get out. Just like they do not like a state-funded retirement plan, they really don't like Social Security either. So, it's a mentality of you're on your own, good luck, Godspeed, and see you on the other side. But our retirement plan, which is now 75 years old, has basically said we have far better results when you have a professional management structure investing those dollars over the course of somebody's career, not making decisions based on emotion, but making them based on professional factual information and due diligence, and then at the end of that career, annuitizing it so that people will have an amount of money to live on, making it extremely difficult for either you or the state to reach into that pot of cash during your lifetime, taking those dollars out so that you're not tempted to do those things, and at the end you have something to live on. And it's worked for the last 75 years. So let's go on to see some additional slides about how it's going to work in the future. Next slide, please. All right, so why is the DC plan bad for Texas public education retirees? Number one, as I already mentioned, 95% of our schools do not pay into Social Security. That backstop for retirement security in the country is Social Security. And if you notice the same, I don't know if it'll come up tonight, you know, everybody is anxious waiting for tonight's debate. But if you watch the last debate, I thought it was a striking difference between the GOP and the Democratic Party when they were asked the question about Social Security. They were asked about in tandem, and many people believe that the Social Security tax and the Medicare tax are one and the same. They're two separate programs, but the question was asked about Social Security. What changes would you make to Social Security? And neither candidate from our two national political parties bit on making substantive changes to Social Security. And it has a lot to do with people's fear about having anything to live on in this economy when they choose to retire, or they simply can no longer work. You know, a lot of people, you know, I'm looking around the room, there's a lot of people in here that are similar to my age. I'm 37. You know, so I have another 30 plus years of working before I start to really think about retiring. But there is a part of Social Security and a part of your retirement plan that many of us don't plan for, even when we're making good financial plans. And that is, what if I can't work? What if something happens to me and I become disabled? And that's a major part of the Social Security insurance program. That people are not willing to sacrifice that peace of mind, that there is some social safety net for everybody in the country. And I think that's why we've moved away from, in this political environment, talking about transitioning to those private accounts. Everybody remember those debates when we listened to probably the last 3 presidential cycles? You've heard people talking about private accounts for Social Security. Wasn't mentioned at all. Now, you know, knowing my luck, it'll be the main topic of conversation tonight. But I thought it was a major, major difference between the presidential cycle this time around than the presidential cycle that we've heard the last 2 or 3 cycles deep. So now Medicare was a major topic of conversation. And this is not a Medicare presentation, so I won't get into it much. All right, so 95% of us are not paying into Social Security. Next slide, please. Among baby boomers born 1946 through 54, 35% are at risk of being unable to maintain their pre-retirement standard of living after they stop working. This number is much larger for those with defined contribution plans. What is this slide suggesting? It is suggesting that when people get older, they are destined to live in poverty because they've made poor decisions on the money that they had to make decisions with when they were working. Does that mean they were bad planners? No. It means that they didn't have all the information they needed to be professional money managers. Bad decisions doesn't really mean that I went out and bought a boat when I should have put money in my retirement account. Now, sometimes it does. But a lot of times it means that I just don't have the expertise to make those decisions. And even when I do have people helping me make those decisions, the cost of making those decisions is so expensive. Going out and hiring the investment professionals out there to help me manage those dollars is expensive. You don't even have to take my word for it. I think it was 2 issues ago, this little known magazine called Consumer Reports. Anybody ever heard of it? It's a car magazine. You know, if you want to buy a car, that's who you look at. Well, they went into a whole story on the fees associated with managing your money as an individual, and how so much of your retirement dollars that you're putting away is being eroded simply by the fees of having professional money managers come in and help you with that. I don't mean to badmouth professional money managers. They're a lot smarter than me. and you should be building up something else besides just TRS, whether that be a 403B or your husband or your wife contributing to a 401k or whatever. There should be some additional savings, and we need those people to help. But we cannot just insert private money managers where TRS is already making significant retirement gains for you today. All right, so next slide, please. Mandatory Social Security. We have a name for everything. We have a name for how much the state legislature is supposed to putting into your retirement plan. We've got acronyms for defined benefit, defined contributions. And now here's this issue, and most of you probably today woke up this morning and probably did not think, I can't wait to have a lecture, hear a lecture about mandatory Social Security. What is mandatory Social Security? It is Congress's attempt to divert money away from our state retirement plans and into the Social Security program. Unfortunately, educators, and I am talking mostly to you that are younger educators in your career, you have a big target on your back. And if it's not the pension manager, the private money managers that are looking to make money off of you, it's the federal government. The federal government knows that the Social Security program, the Social Security Trust Fund, is starting to feel some growing pains, and they're talking about making some changes, not necessarily the private accounts, but maybe raising the retirement age. But one of those issues that the federal government is dealing with today is called sequester. It is the disagreement by the R's and the D's in Congress to make decisions on a budget. And they have instituted these major spending cuts if they could not find some way to deal with the revenues and the expenditures. And that was the thing they were talking about last December. You all remember that whole sequester discussion? Well, it kind of died away, and all of a sudden it's coming back because there's a date certain that those cuts will take effect if they can't come up with some cuts on spending or raising revenues or a combination of both. Social Security is one of those things that's being talked about, and a lot of these commissions have got together at Congress and said, we have to put everything on the table to talk about raising revenue. Raising revenue. Revenue predictions on the congressional side are 10 years out. And so the nice thing about talking about mandatory Social Security is that we take all 1 million school employees and tell them, the state and the school district, we are now going to charge you folks the 6.2% of payroll, both on the employee and the employer side. And we're going to put it in the Social Security Trust Fund. But in that 10-year cycle, how many of you think are going to, when they take that money, that 1 million people, in 10 years, not all of them are going to retire. So the liability of doing that is not as great as the revenue gains of instituting this thing called mandatory Social Security. And for educators in this country, about 14 states are all lumped into this. Now, this is sometimes for my retirees, they like to talk about this at a different level. It's the government pension offset, and for those of you nearing retirement, you may also know it as the windfall elimination provision. 3 totally different issues, all dealing with Social Security. The big one, though, is this, taking those contributions away from the state and sending it off to the federal government. Now, the Texas Constitution says the state legislature must appropriate no less than 6% of the aggregate teacher payroll to the teacher retirement system. So the question is this: how, if the federal government mandates Social Security on the school districts, the state, and the employees, where will the money come from? We can hardly get the state convinced enough to raise the contribution to your retirement system from 6.0%, which is what it was for about 15 years, to 6.58%. Just getting a 0.5% increase in the contribution on your behalf from the Texas legislature took almost 15 years. So where are we going to come up with an additional 12.4% to make contributions to the federal government if this whole issue of mandatory Social Security comes along? And why would we want to? We are not getting a benefit equal to Social Security. We're getting a benefit that's 4 times better than Social Security in the state of Texas. So this plan in Texas just makes more sense. But we're getting squeezed from the federal government side to try and wring out more cash. And they're looking at our 1 million active school employees and saying, wow, we can get an additional 12.4% in the Social Security Trust Fund. So if it's not the feds, you know, it's somebody else. All right, so let's go to the next slide. This could harm the current retirees. All right, if you want to know why we are as concerned about these discussions as we are, let me explain it very succinctly. Legislators will meet with my retirees. TRTA right now has 75,000 members. I expect that our organization will go past the 80,000 member threshold within the next 6 months to a year, maybe even 85,000 members. That's a pretty large group. There is only one other educator group in the state that is larger than the Texas Retired Teachers Association, and y'all should smile right now because it's ATPE. All right, so ATPE has about 116,000 members. We have about 75,000 members and growing. And the bottom line is this: we're linked together in this deal. If the retirees believe for a second that a legislator is saying, look, I think all current retirees should get what they've been promised. Great. There's not a whole lot that you can do to change that anyway, because there's $112 billion in that pension trust fund, and there are a lot of federal laws that prevent you from doing anything less. So that's not much of a give. If we stop making contributions to the teacher retirement system from our active school employees, not only do you lose a benefit that may not mean a whole lot to you right now, but someday, trust me, it will. We lose, because the money that's coming into the retirement system, the lifeblood of our teacher retirement system, are those contributions. And those contributions are invested, and that is the major issue that we're dealing with. If you think about your career and you're making a contribution, you look at your pay stub and you see, I made a 6.4% contribution to the teacher retirement system. Someday I'm going to get something for that. Did you know that within the first 5 years of retirement, within the first 5 years, if you worked in the public schools for 30 years, every dime that you paid into the retirement system in that 30-year career, within the first 5 years of retirement, is paid out to you in full. Now, if that's all the money that you had to live on, that'd be a pretty scary fact, that for 30 years of public service, within 5 years, you've got no money left. Now, the Texas legislature contribution buys you about another 3 to 4 years of retirement, and the rest of your retirement is paid for on the investment earnings that the teacher retirement system makes and has made consistently for 75 years. Those investment earnings, 1% of investment earnings is equal to 4% of contribution from the Texas legislature. So if we stop receiving contributions into this pooled asset, this accumulated pooled asset structure, the teacher retirement system has to completely change how they handle the investments. And one thing that we know that we didn't know when we had these slides first created is that by changing over to a defined contribution plan and saying that those contributions are no longer going into the pooled asset trust, TRS changes their investment strategy entirely. And that cost alone instantly adds about $12 billion of unfunded liability to the current investment structure, the current defined benefit plan. It is not fiscally conservative in the least to switch over to a defined contribution plan. As a matter of fact, it drives up the cost tremendously. All right, so 61% of TRS consists of investment earnings. We talked about that. We'll go to the next slide. All right, so what can we do to change the discussion? First of all, this is a major step forward. I have given this presentation or a similar presentation mostly to active employees over the last 2 months. We have to ring the alarm bells. And unfortunately, I'll say this as a citizen. It's not associated with any group or organization. I am quite honestly sick and tired of hearing about our public schools negatively every time I turn on the radio, watch the television, pick up the newspaper. It seems like the only thing we hear about is negativism on our public schools. And I'm tired of it. As a parent of kids in public schools, as a product of public schools, as a taxpayer, I'm getting pretty sick and tired of hearing about how bad our public schools are. My public schools are great. We have got to stop this slide of creating a disincentive of wanting to work in public schools. It's ridiculous. So we need to come together as a retiree organization, as active school organizations, as groups, as parents, and say, look, enough is enough. We have got to stop attacking our educators. We have got to know the facts. And that's what this presentation is all about. Next slide. All right, this is a manufactured crisis. That is not my term. That was a term first coined, I think, in the Texas Observer magazine. People who are looking at this issue from the private sector look at how good our retirement plan is, and they look at this as an opportunist dream come true to capitalize on other states' problems created mostly by elected officials, and I'll speak from my own personal experience. I grew up in the state of Illinois. It is the poster child for bad retirement decisions on the public sector side. For decades, that legislature decided to collect the contributions from the school employees and did not make contributions that they said they were going to make into those retirement funds to be invested and managed appropriately. So instead of putting the money in, they basically shoved in an IOU. And they kept raising the benefits and said, we'll make everybody happy. We'll not pay for it today, so that'll make the taxpayers happy. And we'll raise the benefits for the employees, and that'll make all of our interest groups happy. And someday, when I'm no longer a legislator, maybe that'll be a problem. Well, those somedays have come back to hit us today. And there are struggles that are happening with public pension plans around the country, but not here. We're 83% funded. The chief investment officer for the teacher retirement system is a brilliant guy. His name is Britt Harris. One of the best analogies that I ever heard him use, talking about why does that 83%, how can I make that 83% number hit home for somebody who doesn't care? Well, think of it this way. On the day you were born until the day you die, somebody said, I know that you're going to need X amount of money. And on the day you're born, I'm going to pre-fund that savings account for you at 83%. And for the rest of your life, we'll figure out how to make up the other 17%. But you're starting on the day that you're born with 83% of those assets already in a savings account for you. That's how you can define our funded status for people who don't understand this. We are 83% funded. My retirees should not be worried about getting their annuity. Quite honestly, people who are within 8 to 10 years of retirement shouldn't have to worry about drastic changes to the retirement. As a matter of fact, one of these slides somewhere says that the teacher retirement system can pay benefits until I think it's 2075. We'll see the exact slide here in a minute, but that's a long time in the future. Considering most legislators, politicians, can only see 2 years into the future, we can pay benefits for a long time to come. And so we're in a pretty good situation. This is not some other state with a major problem. Unfortunately, though, you have a lot of interest groups that want to just beat this drum that we've got to get rid of these plans. All right, so they're attacking a retirement plan in the Texas legislature, and they're counting on on uninformed legislators and the general public to have such animosity towards these defined benefit plans that they'll want to make changes. Even good friends of mine, next slide please, even good friends of mine in the Texas legislature that I know better about these things are saying, well, maybe we really should make some changes to the retirement plans. And again, there's no basis for it except everybody's saying, oh, we have to, the sky is falling. TRS is fiscally healthy. It's not in crisis, 83% funded. Most plans, the threshold for fiscal health is at least 80% funded. Some studies have recently suggested now that if you're at least 70% funded, that you're in good fiscal health. but we meet the threshold of being in good financial health. Next slide, please. All right, we already talked about this some, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about it now. We're an economic stabilizer. If you go to that mom and pop coffee shop I think when I last used these presentations, I was in Brownsville, Texas. All right, so Brownsville, kind of a small town, a lot of home businesses, small businesses. You ask about those individuals who paid into that retirement system and how many educators would come into that coffee shop or go to the local store and continue to buy goods and services in 2009 when everything had hit the fan and all of a sudden nobody was spending anymore. You still had retirees getting money and they were buying goods and services. So it's an economic stabilizer, 98,900 jobs created based on the teacher retirement system alone. Next slide. Again, you can review these at your own leisure. TRS is good for Texas. This is a slide about tax revenue. If you're a legislator and you care about things like revenue, you should leave TRS alone. $690 million in state revenue, and you can see the rest of the numbers. Let's go to the next slide, please. TRS provides capital for businesses. TRS has investment holdings in 73% of the 51 Texas companies included on the May 2011 Fortune 500 list. That's pretty significant. That is money that those businesses are working to receive from TRS as an investment and is providing investment capital for them. Next slide. Fifth largest pension fund in the nation. It has earned more than $45 billion in the last 3 years. Anybody else be able to say that? That as an individual in your private account, you've earned more than $45 billion. Even if you break it down in just percentage earnings, TRS has earned a lot of money based on a percentage, far more than generally the individual investor has been able to earn on their own. Lots of awards saying how good TRS is. Next slide, please. And that's sort of important considering if you look at other states that have had major meltdowns, you see a lot of corruption sometimes in working its way into the public sector. I know that's hard to believe. The last two governors of the state of Illinois are both wearing orange jumpsuits. But Texas TRS is constantly recognized as being one of the best run pension plans in the country, completely devoid of any sort of corruption or mismanagement. All right, so sharing our message, this is where it gets to be hard. It's one thing for me to sit up here and talk and try to go to the legislature and provide testimony. But if you're going to have an impact on this issue, you need to be in Doc Anderson's office. You need to know who your legislators are. You need to be providing the message of, don't mess with my retirement system. I know what's going on. I know the facts. I know that you, Representative Anderson, serve on the House Pensions, Investment, and Financial Services Committee, and that your voice, especially from this area, has even more weight because that's the committee that deals with these issues. And Doc Anderson has been a good, strong voice for you on these issues. And we have to make sure he's committed to that because he's got a lot of pressure on him. Every legislator has a lot of pressure. We all love to badmouth legislators. I was with a friend of mine at a conference. It was called the National Council on State Legislatures. 5,000 people show up at this conference every year. This year it happened to be in Chicago. A friend of mine named John Otto was standing there. We were talking about the pension fund. Why is that important? He's a state legislator. He's a CPA. He gets it. In no less than 5 minutes, in the time that I stood there talking to him, he was bombarded with at least 4 or 5 different people asking him from things ranging from nuclear power generation in the state of Texas to trash collection. These legislators are a constant barrage of messaging from people who are highly financed to deliver that very specific message. I can tell you one thing, though. The nuclear power industry does not have anywhere near the voice power that we do. We may not have the money that some of these other groups do, that like the John and Laura Arnold Foundation. Just pull up their tax documents from the last year. They have something like $880 million in assets vested in their 501c3 charitable not-for-profit organization. TRTA does not have $880 million vested in our organization. But we do have 1 out of every 21 Texans being able to go to the voter's box and make a decision. That is what we need to be doing. Voting, talking, and making sure that we're visible. All right, next slide. All right, if you don't know who your legislators are, we'll let you know. We make it very simple. You can contact us and we'll provide as much information as we can. I'm not sure if the next slide is going to say it or not. Let's go to the next slide. Just a logo slide. If you want to sign up for constant updates on this issue, we have an email service. We've got over 30,000 people signed up for this email service. Now, that's a lot of people willing to listen to me write about something. We don't sell the email list. We don't give it to anybody else. But what we do is we provide you the ability to send emails to your legislators throughout the legislative session on issues relating to your retirement benefits. I want to leave this sentiment with everybody. I'm not talking to the people specifically that are within 10 years of retirement. Yes, I need your help. No, you cannot bow out. Yes, this fight is about you. It's the people who are just starting their career in this important field of public education. If you've got 5 years under your belt and you're wondering, am I really wanting to put up with this for another 25 years? We need you. And if you represent and talk to those people on a daily basis and they're wondering, is there something at the end of the tunnel that's going to make this worth it all? This is a pretty big incentive. Keeping our retirement plan intact is a pretty big incentive. And I have a lot of young teachers that are working at Kiker Elementary. And I know they're just like legislators, a lot of things competing for your attention. Let's let this one cut past the noise. This is one of the ones that's very important. It's about you. It's about your money. Now, I didn't do this, but it's a very simple illustration. I could have, and I've done this before, asked somebody for a $5 bill. And I say, give me the $5 bill, and I keep it up here. And at the end of the presentation, and I just go on, I don't say anything about the $5 bill. All right, if you're trying, this is a neat way to talk about how people can think about their retirement system. At the end of the presentation, if you're talking to your local school or your employees and you say this is important, and you take that $5 bill from them and say, look, you might be wondering what I'm going to do with this $5 bill. Well, I am going to give it back to you, but at the same time, I'm going to give you a $10 bill also. And the reason is because you trusted me enough to hold on to that $5 for you for this entire 35-minute presentation. And for that 35-minute presentation, not only did you earn your $5 back, which is everything that you put into it, I'm going to double it. And so that now you have 3 times the amount of money that you first trusted me with. That is a very good impression of why this retirement system is so important. It's about your money, your future, your health, your livelihood. And people who are attacking this don't generally have a lot of the worries that we may about retirement security. As I said, one of those people is a billionaire. And he's talking about, their organization. I don't know if he is individually or not, but their organization is talking about changing your retirement system. That just doesn't seem right, that we've got something that works, and there are a lot of people out there trying to get rid of it. So I'm going to pause, and I know this is being recorded, so you didn't get a lot of the fire that I generally bring because I wanted to have it for a wide audience of individuals. But I do want to allow for some question and answer and just kind of see if there's anything else that we can talk about. Anybody have any questions? Yes, ma'am.
How can we know, when we go to trta.org, that's where we sign up for the email alerts?
Yes, ma'am. There is, the question was about signing up for the email alerts on our website, which is www.trta.org. In the top right-hand corner of the screen, there is an icon that says sign up for Inside Line or something like that. Click on that. You input your email. There we go. I was hoping he would do that. So it's up on the screen. It's hard for me to see. I'll find it. Oh, Inside Line. I'm sorry. It's the third one over, the first one on the left. So you click on that. Yeah, that's it right there. You type in your email, sign up, and then you get a confirmation email back. Because we have so many people on this, we could be easily classified as a spamming group because we send so many emails out. So we do this double confirmation deal so that everybody knows what they're getting. Once you sign up for that, the only thing that you have left to do is make sure that your spam filter knows to allow us to send the message. And the message comes from Tim, which is my email address, tim@trta.org. Now, the reason I send it from my email address is because you ever have a question about something, it comes directly to me. It doesn't go to some surrogate, it doesn't go to some database, it comes directly to me. And so I try to answer your questions the best that I can. All right, thank you for the question. Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned Bill King and this foundation group. Are they one of the ones that are going to benefit if they take over this plan and manage to change it?
I don't, the question was, will Mr. King or the Laura and John Arnold Foundation individually benefit from the takeover of this? I don't see how. I think their arguments are more ideologically based. There is not a group that I have yet identified of private investment managers that are out there trying to take over the fund. There was the general sentiment for a long time that if there was going to be an attack levied against TRS, that somehow or other somebody's got to personally benefit from this. I think that most of the groups that are vocally attacking it now believe that the biggest payoff is ridding the state of these defined benefit plans so that the state is no longer on the hook for anybody's retirement security. I don't know exactly how they see it, but they may see our teacher retirement system as an entitlement program similar to Medicaid. And they don't like entitlement programs. Well, you know what? An entitlement program is something that you don't necessarily have to pay into to get some benefit out of. The bottom line is you've paid your entire life, your entire working life into this retirement system to get a benefit out of it. It is not an entitlement. I think that anybody who hears that wording, if a legislator, a policymaker, the governor, anybody wants to call this an entitlement, we should be personally offended by that. Because not only would that be true about us, it would be true about the governor. Because as you know, he is receiving his entitlement right now as the governor of the state of Texas and as a state employee retiree. And I don't begrudge him that. He's been in the military. He's been a public servant for a long time. I don't have a problem with legislators getting a retirement benefit based on a judge's salary at $125,000 a year when they make a 6% contribution on $600 annually. I'm not bad-mouthing their retirement benefit, but let's be real here. We're talking about people who've paid into this retirement system all their lives, played by the rules, have done the right thing. TRS has managed the money appropriately. They've handled it the best way they can, and now people are attacking us for doing the right thing. I think every legislator should be personally offended by that because the institutions have done everything they've been told to do, and it's worked. And now they're trying to break it just to implement some solution that's not wanted or needed. I hope that was clear enough. So, yes, sir.
TRS?
Yes, sir.
Are they going after you?
Absolutely, absolutely. ERS is a statewide retirement system, as you know. A major difference between ERS and TRS, though, is that most ERS employees are paying into Social Security. And some legislators are looking at that and saying, well, that's a little more retirement security than our educators have. But I don't believe the traditional retirement system, the defined benefit plan, is broken in any way. ERS has done great managing those assets as well, and it's not broken either. So it's more about just keeping the plans funded over the long term and making minor adjustments from time to time to make sure they're going to be funded for the long term. But yes, they're attacking it as well. Any other questions?
Is there any news, as a widow of someone who paid into Social Security for 35 years, I'm really concerned that my Social Security benefit is reduced simply because I chose to teach.
Right.
Is there any news on whether that's going to be repealed?
Yeah, that's one of the issues that I referred to when we were talking about the Social Security, which is called in that particular scenario, it's called the government pension offset. In case anybody wants to know the difference, the pension offset deals with the spousal or the widower's benefit, as you brought up, and the other issue is the windfall elimination provision. One is based on your spouse's working history, the government pension offset. The other one's based on your own working history. So if you have some job outside of teaching where you've been paying into Social Security, you've been earning Social Security quarters to either pay for Medicare in the future or to receive some sort of Social Security benefit, that's the one that deals with you as an individual, the windfall. Both of those issues, as you can probably guess, like most things in Congress, are being stalled and delayed and are a subject of the whole sequester issue. Social Security has its own large network of issues. And in that network of issues, we find things like mandatory Social Security, government pension offset, windfall elimination provision. The good news is that Texas has 4 people on the House Ways and Means Committee, subcommittee on Social Security. That is probably the highest number of total state representation of any state in the country. And we meet with those individuals regularly. So our main objective right now is trying to stop the mandatory issue, because it would really jeopardize our retirement system funding here at the state level. And we have always advocated, as I know ATP and TSTA and TCTA and all the other organizations advocate for the complete repeal of the GPO and the WEP. But at this stage in Congress, it's less about policy, more about personality and just how nobody's getting along, unfortunately. Maybe we'll see what happens after November 6th. Any other questions or comments? All right, in case you are interested, my organization is the Texas Retired Teachers Association. We have membership, 75,000 members approximately. If you're ever interested in learning more about us, we provide a lot of our content free. We do not have a secured web page. You can get any of our information off of it. If you're ever interested in joining us as an organization member, you can join for the very large sum of $25 for the year. All right, so no, anybody who is a friend of education, active member, retiree, will gladly take anybody in our organization. You do have to be a retiree to serve on our executive board in an elected position. Other than that, though, for example, my mother, who is not a retired Texas teacher, but because she wants to keep tabs on me, I think, joined TRTA. And so you can sign up for $25 for the year. All right? Thank you very much for this opportunity. I appreciate it.